Solo travel sounds glamorous. Just you, your suitcase, and a world of possibilities. I know what you're thinking. Maybe for someone else, but for me, seriously, I would feel intimidated, lonely, awkward. People would stare at me if I was sitting at a bar or restaurant having a glass of wine alone, wouldn't they? Walking into a restaurant alone while everyone else seems to be paired up, not for me. Wanting to meet locals or connect with other travelers, but not really knowing how to break the ice? Well, the good news is wine can be your common denominator, an invitation to connect, a universal language that transcends borders and opens doors. And my guest today is going to share tips you can take on every adventure with you so you never have to worry about dining alone or traveling solo, but you can leverage the communal elements of wine to transform your next journey. Welcome to Everyday Sommelier, where we make learning about wine approachable, fun, and something you can actually enjoy. I'm your host, Kristi Mayfield. Think of me as your sommelier next door, here to help you cut through the complexity so you can enjoy every glass with confidence and learn wine your way. Throughout my 20-plus year corporate career, I spent more time on the road traveling internationally than I did at home a lot of times. Well, at least it felt that way. Most of the time, though, I would find myself flying solo when it came to dinner plans or weekends. And I'd simply pack my iPad or a magazine, head out to a local spot, and spend my time catching up on a movie or a great article. What I didn't do was leverage the time and experience to meet new people over a glass of wine. Had I met today's guest during that time, I would have totally taken a different approach to solo traveling and solo dining. And you should too. My guest today has explored the world from South Africa to Portugal, from Spain to France, and all over the US as a solo traveler. And regardless of her location or the culture she's exploring, Tsvety Roo has learned wine can be the common denominator, the universal language, and the start of lifelong friendships. So Tsvety, welcome to Everyday Sommelier. I am thrilled to have you on the show today. And I would love for you to just give a little bit of background on how solo travel not only transformed your world, but also how that transformed into a wine journey as well.
Thank you. First of all, Kristi, thank you so much for having me on. This is, whenever there's an opportunity to talk about wine, I am there. So this is incredible. And so, yes, I've been a solo traveler for 2.5 years now, and I was doing very much the traditional lifestyle back in the States. My last permanent home was in San Diego. California has amazing wines as well, both of us know. And so I started started to travel in the idea of a solo traveler when I gave up my apartment, and I just put everything in storage, and I set on this journey. And the first year, for sure, I made it a point to whatever city that I was going to. And sometimes there were specific cities that are very wine focused, like Bordeaux, France, to go to wine tastings. Because as a solo traveler, that's one of my tips to people, is to say, if you are missing that connection with people and sort of find yourself a little bit lonely on your travels, definitely sign up for a wine tasting in that new country. And you are going to you're going to meet so many different people there. It's going to open up conversations about where they've traveled from, how you got to that specific country, and you're sipping on some wine. Maybe your cheeks are getting a little red, and all of a sudden you become best friends, which is exactly what happened. So my first destination as a solo traveler, and I had never been there before, to that specific city. It was Malaga, Spain. And I spent a month there as by myself, didn't know a soul. That was so scary for me to do, but I knew that I didn't have anything to go back to, because That's how I structured it. Like I said, I needed this huge change, and it was to start traveling because I finally dug deep inside myself to figure out that it was a dream that I was stifling. And so
Wow.
when I finally, ask myself the question, what have I been putting off to do? What has been just on the back burner? I was too afraid. I was so afraid to touch that part. And then finally, when I tried to basically address it in so many different ways, nothing else was working. And so I had to face myself and I had to ask some important questions. And when I did that, I realized I really wanted to see the world. And I said, okay, then, everyone else is busy. Everyone else has got their own thing going. I'm just going to do it by myself and see how it goes. And I thought it would be only 3 months. It's 2.5 years now. So it evolved quite a bit. And so that from that first point, Malaga, Spain, I went to a wine tasting. By the way, Albarino wine is my absolute favorite. It's not from that region of Spain, though. It's from Galicia, from the northern west part of Spain, is Albarino. I hope that's correct. I'm not a sommelier. But yeah, and I met a wonderful person. She has transformed my life as one of my closest friends. And we met on the very last day in Malaga, this wine tasting. We spent 10 hours together. And like after the wine tasting, we got some whiskey. And she's Australian, completely kind of different world. She looks very different than I do. Like much shorter and like blonde. And yeah, I was just like, we would have never met had it not been this wine tasting, and had she not sat down on the bus next to me like Forrest Gump with Jenny when they were meeting in the movie. And then she was so pivotal in just helping me. I had like a situation in Lisbon, and I just called her up and I said, can I come back to Malaga and stay with you? And that was like a year into our friendship. And it just such deep bonds that can happen from just sharing wine and loving it.
That's such an interesting perspective. Not only, the life decision to become a solo traveler, but also to take wine as that pivot point, because many people do feel awkward or very self-conscious about, well, dining, of course, but also going to a wine tasting, whether that's at a winery or like at a city wine shop. What are some of the common feelings or really common fears that you hear from solo travelers, or maybe you've experienced yourself when it comes to that dining or especially that wine setting?
Yeah, that's such a good question, because a lot of people fear that they're going to get pointed at if they go to a restaurant by themselves or if they go to a bar. And I've heard that from others. I've
Mhm.
given some talks, and I've done some podcasts now that we talked about why there's not as many people that just kind of go out to dinner by themselves. And a lot of them say, I'm afraid to be judged. I just don't want to be judged. I don't want people to pity me, like, oh, this person is here by themselves. They couldn't find anyone to go with. And from that perspective, this is one of the steps that I would say, if you want to do a little bit of solo travel, perhaps start small and start going to a restaurant or a bar in your city, or go do a day trip somewhere. And that can give you the confidence that no one's really going to point at you. I promise. All I've experienced is I've made friends with servers and waiters, and I got to hear their stories. That I make it a point to put the phone down when I am dining or sipping wine alone, because I want to savor the experience. I want to be present when I'm there. And it's, if I'm in Porto in Portugal, I want to basically absorb the surroundings,
Soak it all in.
soak it all in. including the wine.
I traveled for years as a business person, and most of the time I was traveling solo. So I was the person sitting at the bar with my iPad or a wine magazine, a glass of wine and dinner, not soaking it in. So what are some other mistakes that people do make if they are going out to dinner, traveling solo, and instead should be focused, like you said, more on that soaking it up, or
Being
maybe
present.
making some connectivity over that glass of wine? What are some of the common
Exactly.
mistakes?
I the phone is the biggest deterrent. So there's so many people just they sit down or they just look at their phones and they kind of eat really fast and they just kind of want to get out of there. That's not the point of this. It's that and that's also a good segue into kind of taking that time to be with yourself. And so when you put the phone down, you're taking in, you're being with your thoughts. And this is exactly the transformation that I know we started to talk about a little bit, but uh going from me being a very in a very lonely state before I started solo traveling to now solo traveling helping me transform and understand solitude and the difference between loneliness and solitude, which I feel a lot of people don't know. I didn't, that they're completely coming from a different place, and loneliness is emptiness and it's sort of disconnection from the world and disconnection from yourself and feeling unfulfilled and you're not feeling at peace at all. And solitude is sort of coming into yourself. It's embracing that time alone and embracing so many aspects that you were probably afraid to touch before. And so when we eliminate some of those distractions, like putting our phones away or maybe closing the laptop for, let's say, just an hour, you're going to eat. I know you're on there for a business trip, but just an hour while you're eating, closing all of those devices, looking up and having a sort of the other aspect of it. So first, devices put away. And then second is having this body language of being receptive. And then obviously the third one, which is hard for people, is kind of leaning over the next person next to you or the table and kind of saying, what wine are you drinking? Is that one a good wine? And then I'm thinking about what to order. Would you recommend it? And so when you do those three things, you're putting the phone away or your laptop or whatever, you're having a sort of like the attitude, the body language of I'm open for new connections and that mindset. And then you actually begin a conversation, which I know is very hard. And a lot of people will tell me, they're just like, that's too hard for me. But even if you do the first two, you'd be surprised that other people might approach you. So
Right.
between those three things, I think you're going to have a recipe to start sharing some wine with someone.
So we talk frequently in the wine world about, wine is such a people connector, unlike any other beverage. You put a
Mm-hmm.
bottle of wine at the table and it brings just a different dynamic because it's a commonality, but yet it's an individual experience, right? We're all drinking the same bottle, but we're having a different experience with it, whether it's based upon what we're eating or our own palates. So I love what you just said, that wine can really act like an instant, we'll call it an icebreaker or that bridge when you're in a new place or a new culture. So can you
Mm-hmm.
share a couple of examples of when you've been at a restaurant or at a wine tasting? I mean, what are some things that you've done? What are some success stories you've had in engaging people around that wine experience?
Yes. So Porto in Portugal, I'm mentioning again, that was very wine focused trip for me. And I do like port wine, but I still like Albarino better. Uh, And when I went to lunch by myself, and I knew that I was going to be exploring the city that day. And so I started at this one place lunch, and I kind of overheard there were three girls that were just having a good time. And for some reason, the server and I were chit chatting, and I was like, oh, what? I just asked the server, what's an interesting wine that you have? And he brought out this humongous bottle of port. This this bottle was half the size of me. I mean, it was so ridiculous. It was so big. I'm sure you know the exact
Yeah, the Nebuchadnezzars, the Magnums, all the in between,
yeah,
right?
it was so huge. And I was kind of like, I was like, do you mind taking a photo of me? And I was pretending to be drinking this ginormous bottle. And I saw that the ladies next to me really kind of looked over and were very receptive. And then I was like, oh my God, isn't this the huge bottle ever? And they started to laugh. And then all of a sudden we find ourselves 6 hours later. We explored the city together. Two of them were from the UK. One of them was local from Portugal. And it happened, it just, because of this big funny situation and me kind of creating this funny photo, and they were receptive to that. And so it made such a moment. And when you created that moment, and then that sort of said, listen, like, you guys seem very accepting to conversation. And so we started and spent the rest of the day. I said,
Touring together.
just touring the city, and got to learn a little bit about them, and they learned that I was a solo traveler, and it was very, very cool. And so that's one of my favorite stories. And that wasn't even in a specific wine environment. It just naturally was a
Brought about
fun,
by wine.
brought to you by wine. Yes.
So you mentioned that in that group alone, you had a local from Portugal. You had a couple from gals from the UK. Your best friend is Australian. So what are some other ways that exploring, different cultures through wine, so let's say local wine in Portugal, can help either a solo traveler or somebody who's, traveling even in a small group, learn about that culture and take that as a cue to kind of feel more included, less like a traveler or a visitor, but more like somebody soaking up that cultural local experience? How does wine do that? Let's pause for a quick break. We'll be right back. Imagine you have a reservation tonight at the hot new local restaurant. You get there, you're meeting your friends, you sit down, the menu looks amazing. You know exactly what you're ordering to eat. However, you flip the menu over and start looking at the wine list. You don't recognize a single wine, and you have no idea what to order. If this sounds like an experience that you frequently have, you are in luck. Menu Match by WineWise was created exactly for wine lovers like you, because the number one question I get as a wine educator is not, what are the nuances of malolactic fermentation? Or how do you understand the difference between American oak and French oak? It's, how do I know what wine is going to pair with my meal tonight? I would love for you to be part of the beta test to provide real feedback so I can help you make Menu Match the perfect AI sommelier tool to take with you to dinner at any restaurant, anytime, to help you pick the perfect wine. Let WineWise transform your wine journey.
I think it not only brings people from different parts of the world, it educates you also for the culture of that region. And so I think that's important, because then when you go wine tasting, so the Malaga one specifically, I found it on Facebook, and I just put in the search on Facebook, wine tastings in Malaga, and it popped up that it was someone who had just started a business of doing wine tastings. She was from the UK. She was still learning Spanish. So she was technically like not even a local yet, which made it even more interesting, because, she's building the relationships then. And when I joined that, it was in English, thankfully. And most wine tastings are in English. I feel like we're lucky in that way. And when we went, it was so amazing to have the wine owner, the proprietor of the wineries that we went to, just to share about their history as a winery in Spain, and then just kind of tell us, like, this grape is 250 years old, and like all of the stuff that you're soaking it in, and at the same time really enjoying it, and it's hitting all the senses. So you're learning, you're outside, you're breathing some fresh air, you have the taste buds that are being met with amazing taste. And so it's so fulfilling, and not just, and you're making conversation and making friends, and it just hits so many different points of creating a great atmosphere for inner for yourself, inside and outside.
And that's such a great segue because, I studied art history. I never really enjoyed history itself, the written history, but you put it into a painting or a sculpture, or a piece of art, and that's when it connected with me. And so I have traveled a lot and learned a lot about culture through museums, through art. I also now, because of my passion for wine, do the same thing, just like you said, leveraging that wine culture because of the stories and the history, the way it pairs with the local foods. It's a completely different, it's part of a lifestyle in so many places. It's not just a liquid beverage. It's truly a story and part of culture and part of history unfolding right in the glass.
Mhm. I feel so much more at ease, and it's so peaceful at wineries.
Full.
It's beautiful, it's gorgeous, and I don't know, I'm just like, maybe I was born to be on wineries all the time.
Yeah, it's like time stands still sometimes. Svety, for our listener, what are some practical tips that you would give to one of our listeners who wants to use wine as a way to build those connections when traveling, or just, going out alone for an adventure?
Again, I think it's pivotal that they understand the distractions in the phones. They're just blocking you from making connections with other people and yourself. And once you start with that, and then you're at a restaurant and you start this conversation, like, what wine are you drinking? And I think 90% of the time, if you are afraid, a lot of people are just like, oh, but what if that person just doesn't want to chat? Like, I don't want to be that annoying, uh, creepy person to approach them. And it's like 90% of the time they want to chat back, and that's what I found. And they would love to share wine stories. And if you are vulnerable about what you like about this wine, a little bit about yourself, and I found people are going to be vulnerable back. So that's kind of the biggest tip is, start by expressing what you like, a little bit about yourself. Be inquisitive, kind of ask a few questions about this. And I find that people just open up, and then you end up sharing perhaps the rest of the day together.
Sounds like it's been working great for you and all of your solo travels for the past couple of years, Svety. That's really amazing. In wrapping up, could you give our listeners, say, your top 3 tips for leveraging wine, whether they are out traveling solo like you are, or they're just maybe on a group trip and break away for a few hours by themselves, they're on vacation, or even that business trip where they are traveling solo? What are your top 3 tips that you would share?
So one of them is definitely, don't be afraid to have a lovely lunch by yourself, and starting that conversation. So starting conversation over wine. And then I think a lot of the times when I was booking wine tours or wine tastings, there's some that say 8 or 9 or 10 hours, and don't feel intimidated, because it's going to go by in a heartbeat. I think that seems like for us Americans, it seems like such a commitment to to yeah, like, oh my gosh, that's way too long for a wine tasting. What are we going to do with strangers all day? Like, I think, like, you're afraid you're going to be bored. But then all of a sudden you look down and it's 6 p.m. and this wine tasting started at noon, and you're just like, where did the where did the time go? Because let's say you were on the little mini bus on the way there, and then you stopped at this, like all these 3 different wineries, and all 3 of them are different, and all of the like one is like, let's say a Pinot Grigio, and another one is like from more of the reds and like Sauvignon. I'm sorry, Cabernet. There you go. Cabernet Sauvignon. I was forgetting that first part of Sauvignon. And so, like, each of the wineries have their own thing, and they're telling you about the story. And all of a sudden, 8 hours are gone. And so, please don't feel that like that's too much of a time, because what you're doing is you're giving the space to really like understand the culture of those wineries, the taste, and making those connections. So that's my second tip. Definitely still book it. And then for my third tip is don't feel like you're going to be the only person there that's solo. I think a lot of people are just like, oh, only couples go to wine tastings, or I'm going to be such an outside. I'm going to be the 5th wheel or the 7th wheel or whatever. And I'd have to say, like, there's 2 or 3 of us that are solo travelers on these wine tastings. It's predominantly couples. This is true. There's a lot of couples, because that's sort of, it's a romantic thing to do. But I feel like I still enjoy it quite a bit. And there are other solo travelers with me that go to these wine tastings. So don't feel like you're going to be the only one. You're going to enjoy it. Just book it.
Those are such great tips. And I definitely feel that they're all super usable. Again, whether you're just out for a little bit of a break from the group or solo. So I think this has been just so enlightening on how wine can create connections, even if it's not just at the table with people that you already know. You're using it as a connecting device or a connector globally in all of your travels. So, from our listeners' perspective, if you take nothing else away from this episode, remember that you're never really alone when you have a glass of wine in your hand or a bottle of wine to share. And wine can be more than just a beverage or a drink. It can be a bridge to new cultures, to new conversations, to belonging, and, as Tsvety said, to new friendships. And being curious and open really is that fast way. Put your phone down, close your device. In my case, put that magazine away and allow yourself to be engaged and to be receptive to that connectivity wherever you are. So next time you are traveling solo, whether for work, play, otherwise, don't be afraid to pull out that stool, pull up a stool at the bar, order a glass of wine, see where the conversation may take you with other people who are in a similar situation or really just want to connect over a glass of wine, just like you. So Tsvety, any final comments or thoughts that you would share with our listeners?
Please don't be afraid to take that first step. I think that's the hardest part. It took me 9 months of overthinking before I finally booked my one-way ticket to Malaga, Spain. And so I'd love to tell the listeners, if you need a little bit more support with that, please come find me on Instagram and also on my website, and I can help you take that first step to doing a bit of solo traveling, and also recommend some good wines.
I will absolutely have your Instagram and your website in the show notes. And this has been just such a true pleasure to have you on the show today, Tsvety. I've learned so much, and I'm inspired to really leverage wine in a whole new way on my next journeys as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Cheers. Are you as inspired by Tsvety's journey as I am? Are you willing to take the next step and dine out solo, or grab a glass of wine at the bar by yourself the next time you're either on the road or breaking away from a group during your travels? It may not be for you. I guarantee you have a friend or family member who is just as adventurous as Tsvety is. So please share this episode with them today, because they can gain so much advice from what Tsvety has learned and how she's leveraging wine to make her travels less solo. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Kristi, Kristi, Everyday Sommelier, where we're going to continue to transform your wine journey. We are going to continue next week's food and wine pairings and explore some of the other taste elements that can truly dramatically change the way food tastes or wine tastes when you get it right. So cheers, and here's to learning wine your way.